Hey everyone, good morning. I got a rant again. Something's got to be said about these parents who don't discipline their children. Like, I want to rant about this. It's funny because this has been bugging me for a large part of my life, even before I became a parent. And it's like awful. It's always like a big stereotype, among comedians, when they talk about like white cult, white people versus any other minority culture, basically black people, Indian, like it doesn't matter, like Middle East. That there seems to be there's this philosophy almost. Again, you can see it. You can see it as incompetence, and you can see it as a philosophy. And there's people that are incompetent in raising their children. They're not disciplining their children. They're not really raising them, but they don't really know how. Like they don't really know what to do, right? Like so they're kind of like they feel like they're just being lived by their toddlers and their kids. But there's actually people like so there's something to be said about this, but they're actually in some sense you're never the victim in this situation, but in some sense they're the victim in the sense that they nobody gave them the what do you call it, like the handholds, like something to hang on to, taught them the skills, um, to have that, right? Like we wonder why previous generations didn't have that. Well, I'm not saying like all generations raised their kids perfectly. I mean, there's definitely something to be said about how people just got beat the hell up, by their parents. I don't think that's a good thing either. But I want to say something about this. Like there is actually parents. Where it's not like, yeah, I just don't know what to do. It's their actual philosophy not to discipline their children. This pisses me the hell off. Makes me so angry, I guess is the word. I guess frustrated, angry at them and sad for the children because you are raising horrible children. You're like, so I'm sorry. This is a rant. I'm not going to censor myself. That is, but you're not. I think besides creating horrible people that are usually not used to controlling their emotions, they're used to getting what they want. They're not used to having any pushback. They don't respect authority. They don't have respect usually in general at all, right? Unless they learn that somewhere else, like they join a sports team and they have a tough coach or something. Somebody is parenting them instead of you. What you're basically doing, this non-discipline. Like again, I get the other opposite. I get the people that whip out the belt, the stick, and whatever, and start just hammering their child the moment things get out of control. Like that's not good. Like that's not good. But this, like no discipline whatsoever, creates horrible children. But not just horrible children. Children that are this, and that's what makes me sad. That's the angry part. What makes me sad part is that these children are going to be at a huge disadvantage, like socially in life. Like unless they're some strong bully and they become your next asshole leader in politics. No, if they're rich but if they're poor, they become some criminal. Weird, right? Like if they come from money, then they become a professional criminal in politics, and otherwise they become a bully on the streets. Um, these children will not know how to socialize. These are examples, like, because we have that with our kid. Like, so now when you're a parent, like, I never understood that when I didn't have kids, because I always loved kids, and didn't really make. I always liked interacting, I guess, with people in general, but like I like every age group, like from young to old. I never like only babies was like the only thing I didn't know what to do with, but like young children, teenagers, young adults, older people. I could connect with all age groups, but that's I always because I guess because I always was in contact with children in my life. I did like the kids group stuff at church, and with basketball, always liked to kind of when I was young teenagers, like coming up at our local club, you try to help them out, inspire them, and help work on their game. Like I just could easily connect always, I guess. Also with children, some people don't have that. Unfortunately, it's such a blessing. Like it's really just for especially for men. I think you usually see women being drawn to children more than men, and I guess that's right. They're often more agreeable, like that nurturing spirit. Like they're like that. No, it's not that strange that they prefer that. Let me get this chain out of the way. But I think so some that's why some young men are also terrified to become fathers, because they have like zero experience with children. Like they have no idea how to interact with children at all. So I think it's very healthy, although there's this social stigma on men being a threat. Um, it's very healthy, I think, for you. I guess this is a larger problem of our society, that people tend to be just in their age category, kind of interacting with their age category. I think it's healthy to be both interacting with people who are older than you and people who are younger than you, right? Like this is a different subject, but I'll branch off a little bit. It's my rant. Do what I want. This is a little bit about masculinity and manhood as well, but I think for women it's the same. Like you want to be, I like the parable of like you want to be a son, a brother, and a father. You want to be mentored in the sense you want to have fathers in your life, your natural father hopefully, but other father figures, so other people who are older than you, who are beyond you, that can mentor you or that can give you advice or give you wisdom, correct you, confront you. You want to have brothers that keep you accountable, that you're on your peer, so to say. That we're on the same mission, we're going that way. And you want to have sons in the sense of you want to, I think very early on already want to learn how to give back to, like you have these people above you. You want to give back to the people under you or that are coming up, younger, inspire the next generation, kind of say, share what you have learned, even though you are still learning, you can do that. Like, I think that's a healthy way to live. So if we would have that more, then men would also deal with younger versions of themselves more, right? Whether it's you're a teenager and there's younger kids, or you're a young adult and you deal with teenagers or whatever, like I think it's healthy to if you learn how to deal with all these age groups. Like I think God made it in such a way, that's why I think it's important to become a parent. Like I ranted about, you have to become a father because there's something in children that we can learn. Like of course children have to learn something from us. They have to learn how to behave in the world and how to how to be successful in the world, how to be balanced, mature individuals. But there's something about their playful spirit, their inquisitiveness, like the way they question, the curiosity, their almost innate joy that children carry with themselves. They're not taking themselves serious. They're dreamers. There's so many good attributes about children that we can learn from. And to circle back to the parenting, I think that's where these philosophies kind of originate from. There's this idea that somehow the child is the perfect version of the human being. This is, if you think it through, it's a very silly thing to believe. Like it's you can see on the surface, like I say, those qualities that you see in children. That is admirable about children, and this is, I think, where those philosophies about you need to just let children go, like don't know any boundaries, just let them explore life by themselves, because you see that kind of free play spirit. You think like, oh, this should never be there should never be boundaries around this. There should never be corrected or disciplined. But again, this is looking like with just partial partial shades, what do you call it? You're looking at one half of what a child is, right? Like the other half of the child is immature, is somebody who cannot control their emotions, someone who cannot control their impulses, who is in some sense a victim to their emotions and their impulses. And this is, again, why I think this is harmful for the child as well, that they're also selfish brats. Those impulses will lead them to become absolutely self-centered, egotistical, like all those narcissistic, all these things that you're gonna have to discipline out of that child. Like you want to find a way to harness their good sides while what do you call it, creating boundaries around their bad sides. And that's, I guess, what a mature human being is, somebody who's able to channel the best of themselves while containing or restraining the worst of themselves, right? Or changing the worst of themselves if they're mature enough to start doing that. But so again, I think what just by talking out loud, that this is where this come from. But man, like the absolute frustration of seeing, because children, of seeing parents not discipline their children when they're behaving like, when they're displaying clear like red line behaviors, when they're becoming violent, when they're becoming when they're taking stuff from other kids, when they're hitting other kids, stuff like that, when they're cursing back at you, when they're doing, like, this is the whole part where you as a not their parent, but like as a parent watching that can have, well, you're just bringing this on yourself. Like, you let them do whatever they want. Like, yeah, it's so tough when they say no. You're like, you do know that you are way stronger and way bigger. Like, how do you mean it's tough when they say no? Like, I get it. Like, I have young kids too. They're stubborn kids, but they have to learn that you're like, they have to learn. Sure, they have to learn to explore that. What is it even to have a will, right? And that's when the no phase, of course, comes about. But it's absolutely foolish and I think harmful to show them that everything you can do with that will is okay. I think very quickly after that will kind of comes about, and that's pretty early on, they have to know that they have to use that will, like, so that they can control that will, because otherwise you are not, like, people thinking like you're quenching their will. No, you're not. What you are showing them is that will is actually a more, like, they can't separate the intuitive, the instinctive, primal impulses from their will. So, food, I want this, I want that, I don't want this. Like, that's just from them, like, their pure emotional, you could say their emotions and the volition is almost merged together. And this is exactly what's happening in our society as too, like, as well. I think that people are not emotionally regulated. Like, they're being led by their emotions way too much. You can have the other opposite of being led by your thinking only, but there's a healthy balance, right? Like, what a healthy individual should be able to do is like, oh, I feel this impulse of anger, frustration, sadness, whatever, but I can evaluate the situation, and even though my body screams for me to punch that guy in the face, I'm not going to do that. And that's what children need to learn. So what you're actually doing in claiming to just let this kid explore his free will, what you're actually doing is you're letting his will be completely violated by his emotional swings. And for this kid, this means that he is in this constant kind of storm of emotion in some sense, and these emotions are actually ruling him, instead of, I think, the seed of the person is really rooted in the will. You could say the soul is mind, will, emotion, sure, together, but the will is kind of like the key in that is eventually deciding where everything is going to go. So by correcting your children, so like one of the early things that we wanted to do, like young kids, especially in the phase when they're exploring, they're grabbing everything that's different, new, everything that's loose. So the instinct as a parent, you have your kid on your lap, and there you're at the table, and there's some glass there, and of course, oh no, the instinct is just push everything away so they can't reach anything. But then they are not learning to be like, I want to reach that, but I'm not allowed to reach that, which I think was one of the most valuable things that we wanted to learn as quickly as possible. Like, there's things that you just cannot touch, that you're not allowed to touch. Like, here we have all these nice toys and all these nice things that you can play with, and this you cannot. So very early on, I would purposely put the glass in front of her and then be like, no, 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 yeah, that took like 5 minutes or something. But it's actually fascinating how quickly they do learn that. Like, if you do that, like, and of course you still have personality differences, like my son is already different from my daughter, but and that's why you need wisdom how to discipline your children, like a parent, according to their personality. And I get the idea of just always going full strength against their no is not always the best idea. You can kind of divert their attention, but I think it's because a lot of people, you hear that type of advice a lot. No, don't say no to no. And I get it, because it'll ignite the battle of the will. But I think, so yeah, sure, sometimes we do that. You just divert, like, no, I don't want fun. Hey, what is that over there? And then they're like completely forgot what they were rebelling against. And then you put the code on while they're looking at something else, stuff like that. There's all these kind of tricks. And of course you use them as a parent. Like, you got to be wise. You don't want to fight. You don't want to, choose which hill you want to die on. But I think it's an absolute mistake to not teach your children that sometimes there is a no against their no. And that's just end of the story. Like, I think, so I'm always like coming from, user experience design background, UX design, gamification. So there's a lot of behavioral psychology, a lot of looking at motivations and stuff like that, like looking at studying behavior, incentivizing behavior, rewarding, punishing behavior, like in the game-like settings, in learning settings, you know, what is healthy, what is not healthy, right? Like positive feedback, you want to have more affirming feedback than critical feedback, like almost 3 to 1 or more. So these are things you have to kind of, I think what you should see, what you should look at parenting your child, and I think this is what's being lost. So the philosophy that's like the child, that almost like the child intuitively knows what it should be doing and what it wants to be doing. And we need to get out of the way of that, because the only way that people become messed up is because we quench that. That's kind of like their philosophy. And it's absolutely silly, like, because what you're doing, what you're basically saying is that for any and every skill in life that you need to learn, whether it's playing the piano or tying your shoelaces or taking a shit, the kid's like, anything, like from difficult skills to very simple skills. These are skills that you need to learn, and especially more complex skills like playing a sport, for example, or learning how to play an instrument. There would be nobody in their right mind that would say, just leave him alone at the piano. Just see what happens. Could somebody like some Mozart kind of genius learn by himself? Yeah, sure, they could. Will they have proper technique, and will they learn the best and most efficient way to play this thing? Most probably not. Your kid's most probably not Mozart, right? Like the exception proves the rule. Like with any and every skill that you would learn, whether it's a language, like, and you would have a coach, you would assume you would need a coach. Like if you would learn something and you would need to learn something new, and especially if you're like, I want to do it well because there's consequences for me not doing it well. Like your kid, like life's coming at them, like, and they got to be prepared, right? Like it's not like we have this endless space to just F around, you know? You would assume, it's like you assume that that coach is going to take the reins. You're going to set boundaries, sometimes even seemingly arbitrary boundaries for a moment, and then later loosening those boundaries as you increase in skill. Like if you're going to play guitar, they're not going to be like, okay, here you go, you know? No, they're like, no, we're gonna actually mute the strings, and we're only gonna do strumming, right? Why? Because we're practicing the strumming and the rhythm and getting a hold of that, and then we're only gonna do this chord, and we're only gonna do bang, 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 just trying to get like clear sound out of the strings, stuff like that. And you can use that with anything. Like the coaches will direct the behavior of their students, right? Like because they know what they have to learn, what they're gonna be prepared for. Oh, you need to know that how you're gonna use the rhythm here. And then you need to learn this. Like they know, because they know how to play guitar, right? Like so they know what they are preparing you for, and thus they know what sections they have to learn, and they know how to have to limit you temporarily to make that easier for you to learn, to give you not just the skill, the insight and why things work, and the discipline. Like, no, you're gonna practice this song, and the next week I'm gonna drill you on it. And the weird thing is that this philosophy of these children just innately know how to live. It's kind of like almost seeing them like an animal. And I think this is what, again, it just has to matter. Like, what's your ideology? What do you think human beings are? But often these are also kind of spiritual people. It's like the most difficult game of all, the most difficult skill of all, living life, that they're just going to do that automatically. Like something as simple as tying your shoelace, you're going to have to teach them. But how to live life, not. They're just going to intuitively know. Like how absolutely silly and ridiculous that is. Like if you stop to think about it. Like it's the game that we still haven't figured out as parents, right? Like we're learning, we're growing, we're getting better, hopefully, and living, hopefully, happy, fulfilled lives. But it's hard, right? Like life is hard. And you're like that most difficult game with the highest stakes, right? If you mess up your first 5 years of your kid, it's going to have repercussions for the how they learn, which is going to have repercussions for how they graduate, or if they graduate, it's going to have repercussions for how they enter the job market. It's going to have repercussions for how they're going to build a family, if they can afford a house, like all that stuff. Their entire life, like, is set. It's like based upon how good of a start can you give them, like how well can you run along with them on the bike before you There you go. You let them go, and they go off into the world. And if you are basically like, I'm just going to go hands off, you're just setting your kid up for failure. You're a bit, or at least you might have some Mozart genius. Your kid might pick things up, and like I said, somebody will parent that kid. Whether it's his peers, some TV show, some game, some influencer, somebody will parent that kid. Something will parent that kid. And you are basically relinquishing your responsibility to that thing. Like the idea that your kid's just going to figure out by himself is just foolish, especially if you know how human psychology works, like the way we emulate, like how the social influence works, how our desires to be part of a group, like the idea, like I said, somebody is going to do that. Like they're going to absorb that somewhere. They're going to find their authority figure in some sense somewhere. And as a parent, it should be you. Like it's your responsibility. You brought this kid into the world. You have it's not just that to me, you have a divine responsibility. I think it's not just a responsibility, it's a divine task as well. I think it does something to you by becoming a parent. And this is why I think by not parenting your kid, you're also hurting your own development and not just the development of your child. Because what you will actually learn by becoming an authority figure, hopefully a good one, a righteous one who is gentle, who is merciful, but one who is an authority, you will actually learn about authority. You will actually learn about how to be that. Like we've been criticizing the government and all type of leadership all our lives, and now you have to be one. And that's why I think people also are uncomfortable with that. Like there's something, especially it's funny in Dutch culture, and I think it's across the West it's the same, but the funny thing in Dutch culture is that we are very anti-authoritarian. Like we're very, or at least we say so. In the COVID days proved that it wasn't as deep as I thought it was, but anyway. Like Dutch people tend to be like, when you look at our companies, our businesses, they're very non-hierarchical. Like there's a higher version of the idea of the boss that just tells you how it is, right? And then of course it depends per industry. Some industries have that a bit more than other industries. If you're like some guy at a supermarket, of course you'll have that more than when you're have like a more fleshed out job, I guess, or a more complex job than stocking groceries. And that's really like up to the point that you're sometimes even like that your boss would address you in a way and you're like, come on, you're the boss, you can just tell me what to do. You're kind of like going around in circles, kind of avoiding this idea that you don't want to act like an authority because there's such a kind of aversion to it, the idea of somebody imposing himself as an authority, like I said, to a fault, I would say. But the weird thing is so this has invaded like our parenting styles. Like the idea that you are an authority to your child, like it's almost like acting from authority is wrong. It's like completely wrong, which is silly. It's foolish. Like I think every successful person in the world usually has a coach or a personal trainer, somebody to help them. Even the best of the best, right? Like even the best basketball teams, they have a coach, right? Like they have trainers, they have people to help them. Successful people, businesses, one business coaches and stuff like that, to get better, to improve, to show them their blind spots, to keep them accountable. Like there's these basic principles that you should be doing as a parent, like that are there. You give somebody authority in some sense, or to speak in your life and to correct you and to confront you and all that stuff. And you yield to that. And of course, a kid can't pick his parents, like he can't pick his coach, but you've been given as that coach. And I think that's what parents miss. Like they miss the fact that they're parents and they think like, I just want to be friends with this creature. I just want to love this creature. But it's not love. Like you see, it's a distorted, like you can see it's an, what do you call it? Not a distorted relationship. It's a distorted relationship if you don't parent, but like if you try to act like you're their peer, you're not. You're not. You have years more of advantage of life. You're stronger. You're smarter, hopefully. Like, in no way are you equal to that child. So it would be absolutely foolish to treat your relationship as being equal, right? And I think that it's unhinged. It's an unhinged relationship if you treat your child as your peer, especially when they're young. Of course, when they're mature, as they grow up, then the relationship shifts. And that's when kind of like a true friendship can kind of come about. Although you will, in some sense, always be there. You'll always be their parent, but you won't be their caretaker, like always. But anyway, what was I going to say? It's an unbalance. Like it's distorted if you treat him as your peer, because the problem is that kid does not know how to live life. That kid does not have any experience. That kid doesn't know about the dangers that are out there in life. Like, so for example, the example that we encountered, which can just really piss me off, this is why it's not just, it's not just you're messing up, like your family life. If you want to have like a monster in your house that just pulls everything out of every cupboard and just destroys everything, and like, oh yeah, what are you going to do with them? I can tell you. But your kid is also going to go around, and then like, so we had that, like some kid just starts whacking our daughter, and you're like, are you going to slap him or I'm going to slap him? Like, if my child would beat another kid, like, we're not talking about, like, even within the context of a conflict, you would not just want kids to start hitting each other, right? Like, but if it's in the context of a conflict, like they're both playing, start fighting over this card. No, I want it, you want it, yo, I want it, you want it, yo, and they push each other, something like that. This is different. Like, some kid just walking up to another kid, bam. I mean, my son did that as well, like to my daughter, and my daughter did that to my son as well. Like, something about kids that just want to, and this is why I'm saying, like, kids are messed up. Like, if you only see the angelic side in kids, you're not looking at kids. Like, kids are angels and demons at the same time, and we are going to have to make sure that they become the angelic part and control the demon, push away, overcome that demon side of them. And this is just this blind, pink glasses looking at your kid. Like, if my kid does that, like, and like they did to each other, immediately slap on the hand, or I don't know, slap on the diaper. What you want, and I'm immediately correcting them. Like, that is like, they need to feel the weight of what they've done. And if you say like, oh, but they're so small, I can't do that. You know what's going to happen when your kid is 4 years old and he's going to run into other boys and he's going to be doing this? He's going to get his shit smacked. Like, he's going to get his shit smacked. You know, like, he's going to be punched the hell out. Like, what happens to you when you go around the street and punch somebody in the face? There's going to be violence directed at you. There's going to be force, danger directed at you. If you don't teach your kid that this action has this type of response, you are not setting them up for life. You are not setting them up for life. Apart from, like, regardless whether you would get a punch back or not, you should not be doing that. Like, to very early on instill morals into your children, and this idea that they can't learn because they're two is absolute nonsense, because we've been just the moment they can start to communicate, even before they communicate, you already start to, you're not smacking a baby, of course, because they don't understand anything. But like, the moment you can start to communicate, I'm communicating boundaries to my kid. Like, no, trust me, before they can speak, they understand no when you say no. Like, we had that response of my daughter, like, no. Ah! She's just an angry cry looking at me like, how dare you say no to me? But especially when kids become violent and stuff like that, if you don't show them the gravity of that, they will not understand the gravity of that. So you're like, well, you're not supposed to do that. That's not going to work. Like, they have no idea. They're not, you can't treat them like an adult. Like, you know, like in the context of an adult, somebody hits you, like, you could hit them back, but I get why you don't always want to start conflict, and you can use your words, talk to that person, confront that person, all that type of stuff. They can understand what they've been doing because they know the repercussions, because they've learned that. Like, if they don't learn that as kids, then they just be like, that was interesting. How would this work? Just kind of like how they're also they're also trying out, you know, like they're also exploring. So I get that a kid hitting somebody on the head with a car is not the same as a 20-year-old doing that to somebody. Of course, that's true. Like, I get that the children are in some sense based on impulses. They're like, what would this be like? But they do feel something's off. Like, they do, and that's at least also what they need to learn, that they're starting to cross social boundaries, you know? Because when you confront your kids with that, like, look at me, what did you, you know, if they did something nice, they're like, yeah, Daddy, look here. If they did something that they're not supposed to do, like, even when it's the first time they do it, it's like they intuitively feel, I crossed some type of boundary. I don't know what this is. And even if they don't, like, you have to go draw that boundary. Like, unless you think it's okay for, like, the problem is often, to me, is that these children are displaying behavior that if you would ask the parent, do you think this behavior would be healthy or good, or when they grow up, but they're like, no, but they'll figure it out by themselves, or, but yeah, what can you say? Well, this to me the problem. Like, you're afraid to act as an authority and to enforce the authority. So what they basically say, if I say no, he just says no, and then I say no, and then he just doesn't listen. Okay, now what? Now comes the consequence. Like, it's kind of like saying, like, yeah, I broke the law, And the officer says that, like, hey, you're not allowed to do that. I'm like, yeah, well, but I did. He's like, yeah, you're not allowed to. Well, yeah, I did. You know what's going to happen? You're going to get a fine. You're going to get thrown in jail. You're going to have a consequence. You're like, oh, so that's going to happen. Maybe I shouldn't do that. And what you're doing is, and that's why some people don't like disciplining at all. Like, I don't like beating your kid, but a slap on the wrist or a tap on the diaper, that's not going to hurt. Like, a slap on the wrist is going to, it's more the shock of it. Like, ah, you know, like, what's that? And with the shock, you're simulating, what you're doing is you're simulating a negative response in the real world. Whether that's getting a ticket, going to jail, somebody beating you up because you beat them, like being in front, like you're simulating like, oh, if I do something bad could happen to me, right? That's one part of the equation. The other part is that you just want to say, we don't do that. Like that is, so you want to have, so you could say the boundary enforcing. In the Bible, you have this interesting verse about the law, like this, because these are laws, right? Like they're rules and regulations. People don't like them, but a train without rails is not free. You need boundaries and regulations. This is kind of like this illusion that is in Western culture, that's seeping into Western culture, is the idea that rules and boundaries are wrong. Again, like I said, the train is a great example. Those rails those boundaries make the train flourish. Without them, there's no freedom. There's just chaos and destruction. And the same like with any sport, right? Like if you remove the rules, you don't have the sport anymore. Like you can't play basketball if you remove the rules. It's the boundaries. You don't have the painting without the canvas. You know, like in all different facets of life, boundaries and rules are actually what create the ability for something to actually exist and to thrive. The same with life. Like that's why I think God gave rules, because this human machine, works a certain way, and it works bad in another way, right? So, but the boundaries, there's this scripture about the law acted as a guardian when we were young until Christ came. Like the fullness came where our spirits could truly be, and now we're no longer under a guardian. To me, what you're doing with kids is, especially with stuff like that, like your kid hit somebody else, to me, if you're violent, you're going to get a violent response. Sure, I'm not going to do the same thing to them as they did to the kid. Like that would be actually the most fair, to eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. But you're simulating it with a slap on the wrist, or like a tap on the butt, like a spanking on the butt or something on their diaper. And what you're doing is you're showing boundaries. So you do not have the self-control and the will yet to stay within these boundaries. So, but these are hard boundaries. Like we're not doing this as human beings. Like these are values, but until you can see the value of it, you will be stopped by the boundary, so you don't go completely off track. So that's basically what discipline is for, right? At the same time, sure, parenting is more than disciplining and setting boundaries. At the same time, you want to equip your child so they can indeed develop that will, so they can, in their own autonomy, in their own decision, and with their own volition, understand why these boundaries are there, why they're valuable. That's why we say values, right? Like why we value this space and not that space beyond the boundaries. So after a while, they don't need the boundaries anymore. Like they will recognize and intuitively sense, like, yeah, that's the thing I don't want to do because I want to be a person like this. But until they can't, like kids in some sense are, you start in some sense with conditioning, and then comes understanding. And some people don't like that, like the idea, like, is your kid a dog? Like, I'm like, I just hate how it feels like you never know somebody's heart, but it feels like they're kind of like purposefully using these bad examples to kind of get out of the argument. I mean, you would condition yourself, like a coach would condition, if I would start to play basketball or any other sport, the guy's like, hold the racket like this. And I would be like, why? I don't know. Like, he's like, hold the racket like that. Like, you'll find out why after you do it 100 times. And like, you do a backhand like that. You do a forehand like that. You do a serve like that. Like when I teach somebody basketball, I'm going to teach them principles that they might not understand the value of until they really get basketball. Like, why did coach always say I should do this? And then a situation occurs in the game. You're like, oh, wow, because I learned that, now I'm able to guard the ball or whatever that is. Like, and that is so in the beginning, coaching is a lot of conditioning. It's just do A, do B, do C, do D. as you yield to those principles, sometimes even by yielding to those principles, you will start to understand the principles. Like, now I'm hitting a lot more shots when I'm using the right technique instead of when I was just chucking it up like that. Like, why shouldn't I just throw it like that? Because with a better arc, the ball has a higher chance of going in. Like, there's all reasons for everything, but you're not going to explain all the reasons in the beginning because people are not ready for them. There will be just way too much information for somebody to just enter a sport. And the same is true for your kid. Like, that's why you have to start with conditioning. You're setting these boundaries. You're saying these things. You are rewarding right behavior, or rewarding, again, we can do a video about that because I want to do a course about that. Like, you should be careful about how you reward your children. If you want to make sure that their motivation remains intrinsic and not extrinsic. But the problem is some people replace discipline with rewards, right? Like, you don't want to reward your kid for not displaying bad behavior, right? Like, you want not displaying bad behavior to be an intrinsic value. So you don't want to reward that extrinsically because you will kill the intrinsic motivation. You will basically say the only reason why you shouldn't hit kids is because you get candy from me, right? And you don't want that, right? Like, so what you want to do is you want to do both. You want to incentivize good behavior, encourage it, recognize it, acknowledge it, all that type of stuff. Like, oh, wow, you did that. Oh, you were nice. Or, hey, normally you would scream, but now you were patient. You were just waiting until mom and dad were done. Wow, boy, you're becoming a big girl. You know, like, you're confirming their good behavior. I'm not going to give them candy for it, you know, but you're affirming them. You're giving them, you could say, a verbal reward or a status reward. Status reward in that, oh, I'm becoming a big girl, right? Like, everything kids want is to grow up. And what I hate about this parenting strategy is that, like, in some sense, you're taking that away from them. You're taking that away from them to in a quick and a healthy way, mature, right? And some people associate maturing, and I think this is across Western culture because people haven't grown up, whether at 25 or even 30 sometimes, right? Like, just this idea of eternal youth and non-responsibilities has become this weird ideal that is destroying the lives of many people because they lack purpose, because there's no purpose. Like you will lack purpose if you don't take on responsibility, become mature, like giving more of those responsibilities to your kids, expecting more of your kids. There's always you can always go wrong with that, but like that is healthy. Is there an extreme version of that can overburden your children for too long and in some sense rob them of their innocence? Yeah, of course. Some parents do that, treat their kids like they're professional athletes when they're 5, you know. Yes, that there is a bad version of that, but now you have come to the opposite end of like not being a coach at all. You are not preparing your child for the most difficult game of all, the most difficult skill of all, and you're just waltzing them into the lion's den, so to say. And again, depending on if your child is actually strong and thus becomes the bully, he's either become like the bully at the top, the narcissistic bully at the top, or he's going to be the lonely kid at the bottom. Because if they don't learn to socialize, if they don't learn that beating another kid upside the head is something they shouldn't be doing and they will face serious repercussions for, then they will not socialize well, especially when they get around 2, 3, 4 years old and they don't learn to socialize with other kids. Again, the kids will either exclude them from their social groups, the kids that have learned to socialize, or again, they become like a little tyrant in the class, right? That just enforces kind of like people, a narcissistic tyrant. So let's see, where else, where do I want to go? This fear of disciplining. Sometimes it's people that have been like beaten to shit, like, you know, by their parents. Are like, I'm not doing that with my kids, you know, like, so they jump into the other extreme. Some people that just have no idea, or some have indeed that philosophy that disciplining is bad. And I just wish that they could see that this, like I say, it's to discipline. So let's go back to that example of me purposely putting the glass in front of her, my daughter, and saying, you can't touch that, right? Like, she doesn't like that, right? Like, but soon, very soon, in a couple weeks, what happened is, because what we would have like this big, what do you call it? Like closet? Yeah, closet, or I always mix them up. Like bookshelves, you know, like a closet, a lot of books in there. I don't think you call it a closet in English. I don't know. I don't care. You get what I mean. Bunch of book shelves in this big closet. We have like these little coffee tables with fancy stuff that you shouldn't break. That is right at the, the eye height of the kids. And then she has her bag with this big bag, or like, what is it, a box with toys and all that stuff. So what I wanted her to learn is you never, ever touch anything here. You never touch any of those books, and anything on the coffee table you don't touch. So again, in the beginning, she's like, So in the beginning it was hard. No, just to hold her hand. No. She reaches out. No. Every time when I see her, go to get a book. Eden, no. And we get this angry. In the beginning, it would be like, just kind of see if you can keep on going. And then again, if she keeps going, pull her away. Puff, no. And then after a while, the no is enough to get that cry, because they know what that entails. They know this is a hard boundary. I'm not going to be allowed to cross it. So in the beginning, it's like hey, the no is just like, oh yes, I'm going to do this. And then later on, the no cry is going to be, you are thwarting my will, right? Like, so, first thing, so she's just reaching outside, Eden, and just angry like that. But after a while, she's used to that. She would wait for 2 weeks and then try like once again to see if things have changed. But no, things have not changed. But what was the consequence? The consequence that I could just leave her alone in the room, more or less. Not that I would just go off, go to the supermarket. Yeah, you'll be fine by yourself, won't you? You 1.5 year older. But she was super young. Like, she was just able to walk, probably around 1.5, something like that. And she was disciplined, in the sense of, to discipline, like, people associate discipline just with punishment, but to discipline creates discipline in themselves. So discipline is not like just for the sake of discipline. You want self-control. So you want your child to be disciplined. So the moment they have to get used to, I can't touch that, or I can't do that, they are actually practicing one of the most valuable skills they're going to need in their life. This is actually, like, there's a lot of psychological research about this as well. So like I said, this is not just, I think, to me, there's mountains of psychological evidence why this is, and then there's a spiritual side to me as well, about what are human beings and what are we called to do, and so forth. But like, what's it called? Delay of gratification is one of the most important skills and predictors of success in human life. Like, you have the famous marshmallow test, right? Like, where a kid, I think like 4 or 6 years, I don't know what the age group is where they usually do that. They sit a kid in a room, they put a marshmallow in front of them. They're like, if you wait for 1 minute, or 2 minutes, I don't know, I think it's 1 minute. If you wait for 1 minute, you'll get 2 of these. And then they just let the kids sit there, and they're like, I want that marshmallow. But kids that are able to do that, and they track them, later on in life, they are way more successful in education, like socially, school results, better scores at their tests. They're successful basically in all these areas of life. Like, they get better schools, they do better in education. And it's, the weird thing is, like, it was an even better predictor of success than IQ or socioeconomic status, which is something that, especially in our victim culture, people will not believe. Like, you have all the advantage, you privileged white man. But actually, it's sure, there's privileges and advantages to coming from a certain background, but the interesting thing is, this was a bigger predictor of success than your socioeconomic background, so how high you start up the social ladder, and IQ, which was like baffling to me in the beginning, like, wow, so actually being super intelligent. Sure, somebody that's way more intelligent, of course, will have an advantage, but the fact that this is basically, why is delay of gratification so important? Because it's basically the foundation for hard work. The idea of, I'm going to work at this and keep working at this, even though I don't have immediate gratification, I don't have immediate feedback. So that's it's the foundation to behaviors like hard work. It's the foundations to saving behavior, being able to save up money. But it's also the behavior of socially waiting for your turn, like letting other people speak, listening to others, not just dominating the entire conversation, something which I need to learn. I need a bit of a delay gratification there. So it'll help in all these different areas of life, right? And what is delay of gratification? It's the ability to discipline yourself, because it's like your body will say, my body is telling me yes, but my mind, mind's telling me no, body's telling me yes, but it should be the other way around, like I just said. That's what you want your kid to learn. Like, so what these parents often don't see is that this is one of the most valuable skills, again, one of the biggest predictors of the success of your child, socially, economically, educationally, like all these areas. And this is, you're allowing them to be to do that, to be able to discipline themselves. Because first it's a discipline from outside in, then they start to internalize that, and then they're able to do it by themselves. After a while, I don't have to say, don't touch the books right there that are right at your eye level that you can just go and grab. You can walk towards, you can grab. But guess what? That even when I don't see that, I'm 100% sure that voice or that feeling is still in them. They look at that thing, they're like, man, would I like to touch them? But they say no to themselves, right? First, the voice is externalized and internalized. So that's basically conditioning, right? But that conditioning, again, it's not brainwashing. You are training them as well to be like, to see, oh, wait a minute, I can actually do that. My will can actually do that. My will can actually say no to this feeling. And as they learn that, they start moving from living in this whirl of emotions that is also so tiring for them and overwhelming for them. And the will comes kind of to the top. So I would say that that's only when they start to truly express and manifest their will, because they're able to control their emotions more, right? And regulate their emotions. Like, this is so important to, like, well, not everybody hopefully knows how important it is to regulate your emotions in any type of social situation. If you want to be successful socially, if you want to have friends, if you want to be well liked, and not in a way like, people like me, but just like, are you able to connect easily with people? Again, this is not just in the terms of success in life, but just in success in the sense of being a healthy individual, just in yourself. Like what you see often with the other kids, they're constantly tantruming, which means they're constantly being given over to the spirit of rage, basically. You think that kid is happy? The kid's not happy. That's often why you see that as you enforce boundaries, sure, you will have a little anger explosion in the beginning. Kids afterwards will become way more peaceful. Again, because you have taught them that their mind, that their will is actually over this primal instinct, that they are not just those primal feelings and impulses. And in this weird kind of way of allowing their kids freedom, you are actually yielding them to that destructive force in human beings that creates the monsters when they're mature, like to be fair, the narcissists, the psychos, the serial killers, the bullies, every bad thing, the rapists that just take whatever they want, like all these people have something of that. They have something of that they are, one, either not controlling these urges, or they have learned that I don't have to control these urges. I get whatever I want, whenever I want. There's something in that. I'm not saying that all these kids are going to be these monstrous people, but I am saying all these monstrous people do have that quality. So I hope parents can see that. I hope you can see that raising your kid, actually taking responsibility, raising your kid, like you get to say, like, it's also kind of like a lack of trust. Also almost like you have a very bad self-image as well. Like a kind of worthless self-image, it feels. It doesn't, again, I'm generalizing. It's not always the case. Of course, people have different reasons for embracing this ideology or philosophy, like of raising kids. Some people are just super persuaded and that all these things are just harmful for the child and all that stuff. Like, I think the problem is that we see it in our society. The idea of having negative emotions is somehow harmful. Sure, it can be. If you're constantly in negative emotions, that is harmful. But encountering a boundary, that makes you feel like, I have a negative emotion. That is not harmful. Like, that is not, that, again, like I said, that boundary will help you to prosper if that behavior is actually destructive, either to you or to somebody else, right? And again, internalizing that discipline is one of the most valuable skills they can have. So the good thing with what we saw with our daughter was that, and again, like I say, their kids are different, right? Like I already see my son is way more like, even more adventurous and exploring and constantly trying to do that as well. But so we just need a bit more, we need more discipline in disciplining him as well. And you still see it's working. But what you saw with my daughter was that internalized behavior replicates itself. So, or it duplicates itself. It becomes a general, to her, it doesn't become a situational behavior of I can't touch the books here and I can't touch this coffee table. It becomes a general internalized discipline about I can't touch stuff on coffee tables. So when she would come to my mom, she wouldn't just start ripping everything off the table, And even if she would again, kids are gonna touch, they're gonna look for the boundaries. Also because they're kind of, they want to see where the line is, right? I'll get back to that too about clarity. But then my mom would just have to say no, and then she would no again because it's an echo of something. Oh yeah, I'm not supposed to do that, right? Like, and if even if it's something else in the house of my mom, you're not allowed to touch that. Oh yeah, there's some things that I'm not allowed to touch, right? To have that internalized. Yeah, what else want to say? But like I said, that calm and that kind of that the kids kind of overcoming that just whirl of impulses and primal emotions and desires and wants of their body, to kind of actually kind of breathe above that and have like space of like, oh, I can actually calmly decide, and I can actually, everything's okay if I can't touch that book, you know, that it isn't the end of the world. Like, I think that's especially what you want to learn your kid, because it's going to be a lot of disappointment in life. You can't have everything. I think it's a very bad thing to teach your kid that they can have everything. It'll create very spoiled children that will never learn the value of hard work. Like, what is hard work? I want something, but I can't have it unless I work really hard. And working really hard is really difficult and is pain in some sense. But if I persevere, again, delay of gratification, but also like the perseverance, like there's so many virtues that you would teach your child by disciplining and by arbitrarily delaying gratification. No, you're not going to have that right now. Like, you know, or you're not going to have that at all. Like, you're not going to have that. What it creates is, again, even if you remove it from the value and the morals point of view, because people could disagree about values and morals, although some things I hope are still universal, you have to look at it of simulating life, in a sense of like, just like a coach and a trainer with sports would try to simulate the intensity of a competitive game. Right? Like, so when you're really in a game against a team that wants to win and there's stakes, what is that going to feel like? How should you defend? How should you engage the offense? Like, how should engage in the offense? How should you learn to trust each other? How should you learn to persevere through that your body gets tired, that you get like the referee doesn't call the fouls or whatever like that. Like, the coach's responsibility is to simulate as much as possible the actual situation when it matters, right? And of course, as a kid, technically that situation is right now all the time. Like, they're in life. There's no non-life. But what you have by having your kid at home is you have some type of a safe environment that's like a microcosm of my life, a microcosm of a society, like with the family, that is bigger and has, in some sense, bigger repercussions out there. So you can create safe space with safe repercussions. Like, if I give her a slap on the wrist, that's something else than some other kid whacking her back with a car in her face when she pushes some other kid, right? Like, that is more out of control. So it's your responsibility as parents, even if you disagree about like, oh, I don't think those are necessarily values. This is what's going to be like in the real world. You're not going to get everything you want, right? Like, you're not going to get everything you want. And again, the predictors, I think, of being successful: high intelligence, hard work, delayed gratification. Like, they're simple skills. They're almost skills. They're social skills, soft skills, I want to call them, that help people succeed. Right? That it's not just having money, right? Like, sure, that helps. So you get a little bit more leeway, a little more flexibility, but eventually that person is going to lose all that money if they don't use these strong values. So you should, I think that's a healthy way of looking at parenting. So if people start looking at parenting like that, like, okay, I got to prepare my kid for life. So instead of thinking about some idealized, like, yeah, just everything you feel, and if you want to do that, then you want to do that, and you want to do this, you want to do this. Like, does that work like that in the real world? Are you going to get a job like that? Are you going to be able to function in society? Are you going to become incredibly self-centered? Like, we are social beings. We need each other. We want people to perform in context of hierarchies because life is hierarchical. You want people to, your kids able to function in just social settings because life is social, you know, like, because there's advantages in social networks, like having a good network around you will not only make it easier to have better morals or to have better values or to become more directed towards a better goal. It will also allow more opportunities because you know more people, so there's more skills in your life that you could learn from and that you could use when you get in a time of trouble. There's more connections to connect to other people for job opportunities or opportunities to grow, and all those type of things. So if you look at it like that, it's your responsibility that they are coached, conditioned, trained as well as possible to engage in that, call it a game, right? Like those behaviors. And that's why I think you're doing a huge disservice to your child. And again, under these ideologies might be just false assumptions, which, like I say, false assumptions. Like if you say, like, yeah, these kids just have these impulses. Yeah, just like you. Like you're acting like there's some unique situation about that child. Like the fact that they can communicate with you, and like the moment they have those, like I say, very early on, they will understand stuff like boundaries. And if they don't, the reinforcement of their boundaries, that they will understand that from like 1.5, like very early on. And that's why we started very early on, so that when they get to the terrible twos, what they always say, when that starts to explode even more, she has already internalized the idea of like some things I'm not allowed to do, some things I am. She's going to test them more, and she's going to try more stuff, and she's going to be like, hey, I want to pick my own clothes, and I want to pick these things. And that's where you have wisdom as a child to see where you give, where what you want to do is you want to create a safe space for autonomy. So I agree, like where people are afraid to discipline your kids because they are used to like the full top-down authority parent that just micromanages the life of their child, and thus the child doesn't develop their own kind of self-will. What do I want to do? What do I care about? And that's harmful too. Like I completely agree with that. But what you want to do, again, like a coach, if I teach somebody basketball, I will not give him full freedom because it will just completely overwhelm him. Like I would just let you go do whatever the hell you want. No, I'm giving you this exercise, and within that exercise, there's this type of freedom. So within, and you match that to their skill level, right? The higher their skill level gets, the more freedom you get. This is even true in a professional setting, right? Like the better a player is, the more the coach will give him leeway to just operate out of his own autonomy because of the combination of his skill and his hard work. Like he's prepared himself for that, right? Like so now he's capable of receiving that autonomy. And all the other players will get autonomy within boundaries, right? Like you can take these type of shots. This is what we expect of you. And he flourishes, hopefully, in that role. If it's too strict, indeed, they don't flourish. But also, if it's too loose, they don't flourish. And I think that's what these parents forget. They see, like, if it's too strict, they can't flourish. That's absolutely true. But if it's too loose, they won't. Again, the train analogy, without the rails, the trail cannot go. It cannot go fast. It cannot do what it's supposed to do. So what you want to do is find that balance for your children, to have the hard boundaries. Again, the hard boundaries hopefully are driven by social values, like you don't hurt other people, we apologize, because again, that's also what happened in that situation. Not only did that kid that hit my daughter didn't get really corrected, like he didn't get a consequence for crossing, in my eyes, a red line. He didn't have to, it was like, oh, don't do that. He didn't have to apologize. So what you're basically learning is that it's okay to rupture a relationship. And there's no consequences to it. All right, like even if he would just not hurt her, but like yell at her or spit at her or whatever, like other things, you are training your kid that it's okay to violate other people's personal space or boundaries, to disrespect other people, and that's just going to be okay. That even if you stop doing that, then nothing happens. And this is how you create these narcissistic people that just think it's okay to use and abuse people, basically, right? And again, not every kid that has that really young necessarily has to develop into that, but you're setting them up for that. Like if you're never training them like that, they will probably develop like that. Because if you're not correcting them when they're 2, trust me, when they're 12, they're going to be a whole lot harder to correct when they're bigger, because they're used to this now, right? So if you don't start early on, it's a very hard skill to internalize. So that's why you want it almost internalized. That's why you condition it almost, that it's such an internalized thing that they don't even have to think about it when they're old. And now they can focus on more important skills. And the problem is, if your kid is still dealing with regulating their emotions and not hitting, like not being an absolute asshole, an antisocial machine, they're going to have that's going to disrupt their learning. It's going to disrupt their ability to connect. Like it's going to disrupt all these things that they should be learning now at the other age that would able to make them more mature and make them, again, better human beings, right? Like you want them to focus on developing their skills and their interests and their curiosity. But if they still haven't found a way to handle this machine, so to say, you're just setting them up for failure. Man, I could go on and on about this, man. It's like I say, that thing about not teaching your kids to apologize. I think, like I say, it's such a harmful thing, because you're teaching them it's okay to breach trust in relationship and to break them. And you see, like, kids very early on know that feeling of, what is it? I don't know, shame, guilt, and I've done something wrong. and I just want to continue playing. But we're like, no, no, no. You're gonna look at your brother, or look at me, or look at your mom. You're gonna say I'm sorry. And we've had like 20-minute fights over that. Like, we go there, put her in a bed. You're gonna say sorry. And they think it's like they're scared of that. Like they're so. To me, that shows like that the soul intuitively, that there is, yes, in some sense, like I said, what these people say, there's this intuitive sense. Yes, in some sense, there is an intuitive sense in human beings about right and wrong and stuff like that. But you still have to teach them. You still have to teach them to that impulse in you. You should listen to that impulse and not to that one. Like, you should listen to the one, your conscious side, and not the other one, right? Like, because there's two sides. Like I said, there's that angel and demon kind of side to them, and it's your ability for them to discern between them and to choose and to yield to one of them and not listen to the other one. So we would have like that. Put her in bed, like, oh no, no, and then after a minute, she's not doing that. Okay, no, I'll give you some more space to think. Daddy leaves. 2 minutes later, you come back. So, are you ready to say sorry? No, okay, and I go, like, it keeps going on for like 20 minutes, and then after a while, I'm like, yeah, I'm, what would you say? Spannend, what's that? Scared is not quite the right translation of that. I'm tense, I'm anxious about it, I don't know, something like that, maybe. Kind of like somewhere between being anxious and scared, like, I'm scared of the confrontation. She's scared of confrontation, right? Like, so I'm okay, so, you first want your what do you call it? Your toy to say it, You get a little teddy bear. The teddy bear says sorry. You say it that the teddy bear says sorry. Right? Like, first Daddy does it, then you do it. Okay, now you say. But we end always with, you look me in the face and you say it. And that way, it's really hard for kids. Like my son, the first time he had to do that, same thing, 20 minutes. And then the last, when he finally did it. So you have grace for your kids, like where they at. So the first time was like, sorry. But as she gets older, like my daughter's a little older, she's 3, so she has to say not just sorry Dad, sorry to the person you're offended, so sorry Daddy, sorry Mommy, sorry Joshua, her brother, and why are you sorry? Sorry for hitting you, sorry for yelling at you, sorry for stealing your toy, like whatever. She has to explain. So what you train them very early on, again, it's a skill that most adults haven't learned, is to deal with conflict. Like, if you can help your kid resolve conflict, man, how you set them up for life. Like, how difficult that is? I mean, as adults, we know that. We're in relationships. A lot of people have no way how to deal with conflict. Like, they let things go, pile up, and then there's this big explosion and people break up or they get divorced. Like, people are not used to say, like, hey, that hurt me, and that made me feel bad. Like, or like, what you did there offended me, or whatever. I felt like you didn't see me, or like, to just talk about that. Like, you don't have to be right about like I said, a lot of the hurt of you comes from your own past and stuff. That's regardless of that, like, just to be able to talk about that and have a conversation about that. And if there is guilt at the other side, or if the party's like, oh, yeah, I'm sorry, I did say that from a wrong intention, or I did say that maybe a little bit to sting because I was frustrated, or like, and to be able to talk about that and then make up, like, I'm sorry. That's so powerful. Like, that's like the core of healthy relationships. Like, long-lasting relationships are able to confront each other about simple and little things. Like, that was actually, I think, research, I think, about divorce, that actually healthy, that actually the marriages that didn't have any arguments or fights were actually the ones that tended to break up, and ones that had a lot of small little arguments. So not like constant argument, but like small little things that it would resolve quickly. Those would actually be the healthy marriages, because nothing would pile up, right? Like, and it would take the weight away from the confrontation, because if you do it so often, after a while, it doesn't feel like you're arguing all the time, right? Because you don't want that, of course. So if you can teach that to your kids, like this idea that parents have, like, yeah, but they don't know how to do that. No shit. That's why you're the parent. That's why you teach them. Like, and that's what I don't get. It's like, you just think they're just gonna do that by themselves. I think there's like the big assumption, damaging assumption that underlies that whole philosophy. This idea that that again, the most difficult game of life, they will just learn how to play well by themselves. And no other skill you would do that. Not with piano, not with tying, not even with tying your shoelaces. You know, like, and that's why I really hoped. Again, I'm frustrated, but it's also because I want to empower parents. Because it's also, again, the other side is, especially when they crush your social boundaries. When you're messing with my kid has a horrible example at school. My kid gets their stuff, like toys ripped apart, and people smacking people around. And again, my child has to deal with. I have to teach her to deal with those negative situations anyway. But that is not healthy behavior, right? Like, and as soon as you start damaging other kids, yeah, now I'm involved. Like now I care. Now you get. I'm gonna say something about it. But separate from that, your own home. I wish a lot of parents that they would have that so they can know that that chaos that you have in your home doesn't have to be like that. And sure, having kids will always be chaos in some sense because they're continually growing and there's continually these new boundaries and these new freedoms that you're giving them and weighing, am I going to give this new freedom to them? When are they ready for that? Like, that's constantly like a good coach. Like, have they leveled up? Have they mastered this? Can I allow them that? I was just talking about that with my wife yesterday. Like, we see, and I think that's kind of like the natural gravity of the father. If a father is there as the father and really taking up his role as a parent, is that I would say it's healthy to have the mom leans more towards nurture, which is often also where women tend to lean towards more than men, and the men leans towards order and discipline, right? And that you balance each other. Like, you don't want the household to become like a tyranny, and you don't want it to become like an anarchy, you know, like complete chaos. Because just you never want to disappoint them, and you don't want the father just completely dominating over everything. So you balance each other. But what we did see was that we saw that the kids were like how they respond to me and how to respond to her. You see, like, how you enforce boundaries. We could already see the difference in our own relationship. Like, the more diligent or the more what do you call it, consequent. Diligent you are to keep maintaining a certain boundary, even though they're going to hit it. That will translate to respect eventually. They will like, okay, I know I can't cross that boundary because dad says so. But you want that for both mom and dad. You know, you don't want to listen to dad, not to mom, or listen to mom and not to dad, stuff like that. So you don't want to subvert each other's boundaries. That's why it's important to keep communicating with each other. But you can't keep balancing each other constantly about, like, okay, what are these healthy boundaries? Is this too strict, like arbitrarily strict, or is this arbitrary, or is this chaotic and loose, and the kids don't respect us anymore, or the kids are becoming overwhelmed by their own emotions because of the many options. Like, again, in psychology, this is even true, like from a gamification perspective. This is true for adults. If you overwhelm adults with too many options, they get like choice paralysis, right? Like, so that's also like with like the idea of saying no to your kids, like, you're not allowed to touch this at all, ever. When people tend to think there's a negative, but they like to explore different shapes and sizes. Well, get one thing and put it in the toy bin or whatever, in the toy box, that they can play with. If it's about textures and stuff, like, this is about recognizing their stuff that's not yours, especially also because you come to other parents. Like, I hate that kids come over at our place, you can immediately tell whether these kids is raised or not. Like, this kid is just like, yeah, nice to go play with the kids, or kids that start jumping on the couches, pulling stuff anywhere, and again, no correction from the parents. Like, I just cannot fathom that the what has happened is just, this kid is ruling the house. You have yielded to your child. You have yielded the authority to a 2-year-old. And that's why I think that there might be this self-image thing behind it, of thinking, not knowing your own worth. Like, it's almost like you feel like you're worthless, like you're worth more than being ruled by a 2-year-old tyrant that doesn't know what the hell he's doing, right? And yes, some people, it's like they don't have the confidence of saying, like, I am allowed to do this. I am the expert here, flawed as we are. I have more expertise about life than you, and take that, claim that, right? Like, and I think that's why I think that acting like a parent will also restore a lot of kind of like that self-value in people, and make them mature a step beyond where they are, you know? Yeah, I hope they see that, because it's so frustrating. Like, I think it's just asocial to have, like, your kid somewhere else and to just tear the house down, and you're not even correct, like, especially when they're there and you're not even correcting them. Like, you know, you look like a doofus. You look like a weakling. And you are. Like, you're letting this kid dictate your life. It's so weird to me. Like, you wouldn't do that with an adult. You wouldn't let your partner do that. But you're letting a kid do that. Like, it says, it's this weird inversion, kind of like a subversion of the ranking. But I hope that they see, like, that clarity that kids get. Like, for a kid, everything is new, right? Like, the colors, the shapes, the textures, the sounds, the smells. They're being completely overwhelmed with this beautiful thing we call life, right? So actually, by shutting down, you cannot touch all these books. You cannot touch anything on that table. You cannot go here in the kitchen. What it actually does is it limits their choices so they can be focused, and it'll give them a lot more peace. They'll be like, I don't even have to consider this. Like, you know, famously Steve Jobs did that with his clothes, like same clothes every day, because I'm saving mental energy. I don't have to think about that. Well, that's what you're doing for your kid, only in a way bigger way. If you say you're not allowed to go in the kitchen at all, period. That's it. You're not allowed to touch these things. This is what you're allowed to play with, and here you're allowed to play with. That's already, hopefully, you have some diverse stuff, like a lot what your kid can play with. That's all, and that will actually help the kid. Okay, still that chaotic voice that's like, I want this, 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 and actually still them be like, okay, to make it controllable. We see that again, like we see it in video games. You give just an amount of choice to make a player feel autonomous, even though you're directing them in that way. You're going that way anyway, buddy. Like, games are great at that, to make you feel like you have autonomy, even when you don't, when there's even just one option, to shape it in such a way that you still feel the autonomy, and that's why you want to keep playing that game. That's kind of what you want to do with your kids. Like, you want to give sometimes illusions of choice, or real choice in a contained space, not overwhelmed, so they have that clarity and that peace. And as they grow, of course, that's going to increase as they mature, as they become, as you see they control their emotions, as they see they have that calm. You can slowly add to that, until you see, usually when you see your kid have a lot of tantrums and a lot of these angry things, that's usually they're overwhelmed in some sense. They either are too tired, or they haven't eaten, of course, there's like these physical reasons, or they're just completely overwhelmed because they don't know, like they don't feel safe. No, I think that's an important one as well. Why they become violent, why they become doing these things, because they don't feel safe. If you don't have boundaries, they don't feel safe. They don't know. It's kind of like if you would walk on a floor that just occasionally just goes down and not give you feedback, or like 50% of the chairs you sit on will just collapse, like you wouldn't feel safe in these situations either. Like, kids need to know what they can push against, and that will remain. Okay, this is a boundary. Okay, like that. Human beings have that. That's why we feel safe in context of teams. Like, what can we do? What am I allowed to do? What is expected of me? Kids want the same thing. You will give them peace. You will allow them to flourish and thrive, hopefully, in this game of life. Internalize skills like delay of gratification, let your discipline, give them self-discipline, and yeah, you will set them up for life, and you will have a lot more peace in your home, and you will see, again, hopefully get that self-confidence back as well. Like, my voice is to be obeyed as the parent, right? And you grow, hopefully, if you have a good partner, you grow in balancing each other out. You can still listen to your child. Like, I think that's maybe one of the few things that I do agree with in that moment, that you would like to invite your child and invite them in some sense, and not really in the decision-making process, but in voicing their will, what they desire. But you as the parent, you're going to have to make those decisions until they get old enough, you know, like until you see they have the freedom. And the earlier, the weird paradoxical thing is actually, the earlier you start disciplining, the earlier you can actually do that which you, like the good side of what they see, of the child with the curiosity and inquisitiveness and allowing them free reign. The more discipline they have early on, the earlier they're actually capable of traversing like new terrain and exploring things. Right, like the disciplined player is able to learn a lot quicker than the undisciplined player, right? So yeah, again, same for if you learn piano, like all these things. People who are disciplined, they actually improve way faster than people who are not disciplined. And that will actually give them the sooner you get to, you have the discipline of the basics, the sooner you get to the free play. Like if you want to, like, yeah, I didn't want to do guitar solos. Well, the quicker you yield to the limitation of just playing these things, the quicker you will understand the rules of music, and the quicker you can actually go freestyle. You know, same with drawing. I want to go draw whatever I want. Well, the quicker you yield to just first emulating nature, emulating autonomy, you will understand human autonomy, and then you will be able to draw people in shapes and poses that are not in front of you, like just from your mind. So it's always like that, and I hope people see that like that. Start with discipline early on. They will learn the basic rules in some sense of life, controlling their emotions, self-discipline, of how their will works, of what they can and cannot do, and then the sooner they are there, the sooner they can start the playful childlike in life, right? Maybe just a small thing about physical discipline, because I know there's some people that are like again, you have the two opposites. People just beat the living crap out of their kids, and people like, you should never lay a hand on a child, and to me, I've always felt like, because I both had this spanking, not a lot, like, and a smack on the wrist, and to me, it's just like, especially when you have really young kids, like if you have young kids that can go touch the electric sockets, like, what you want is, you want your kids, again, you want to simulate a heavy response from life. So if you look at it like that, why I think the slap or the spanking is still very valuable, and that it's not necessarily about, again, the slap is in some sense, the pain. I think the smack on the bottom, especially with diapers, that's more shock. That's more like, oh, what's happening? Like, oh, let me somebody over the knee. There's more like that. And the slap on the wrist, sure, there's some pain, there's a sting, there's a like involved in there. It's also a big shock. Why I think that is still valuable is because, especially when your kid is not yet at the communicative stage, when you're not able to have a conversation to say, like, that you'll actually die if you do that. They need to know that the no is a no. Like, that's why I think it's important that for people also to understand that you as a parent, that's important that your voice becomes an authority that they listen to, just because it's you. Not just because they understand the situation, because if there might be a difficult situation, that's a new situation, they might run across the road and a truck is coming, you say no, and they stop, because they're used to that, and you've saved their life. That's kind of like an extreme situation, but it's not, what do you call it, like it's not a rare situation. This is going to happen, like in life, like this, like these things, there are dangerous things, like they're about to walk over a cliff, they're about to jump in front of a bike. There's all these dangers. They're about to touch an electric socket. They're about to, I don't know, jump into a pool. Like, there's all these dangers out there in life, for your kid, that you're gonna have to prepare them for. And before they're able to be, again, reason with them why that is dangerous, they're just gonna need to be able to listen on the basis of your authority and your voice. So that's why I think it's important to, very early on, as early as possible, like I said, 1 year old, start there, start with the no, start with the yes, like to realize, because it could save their life. It's just that simple. That it could save their life. So to me, in the context of that, like the importance of your voice having weight for those type of situations, that they have to listen to you in those type of situations, that you want them to not be like, just keep going, that they are used to, like, oh, mom and dad saying something important in here, right? Like, in that context, that's why I think the slap on the wrist is still valuable. I think you can always, I would always say, like, it's the extreme, kind of like, right? Like, so I tend to use it in those type of situations, like at the moment, like, they are about to do something really dangerous, like Joshua, no. What I want is just an internalized sensation. Oh, wow, should not be doing that, to create safe boundaries. Of course, when he's older, I don't have to do that anymore, hopefully. But it works. Simple. It works. It works very simply. The idea that this pain is going to traumatize them is just absolutely silly to me. Like, if you're somebody who does that all the time, like, it's just constantly putting hands on your kids, like, because with other things, when they're not dangerous, like he wants to reach this glass, like I said, with the scratch, you can just hold. You're stronger, right? Like, you just hold them. No, like, you're like, no. I want that. They're just used to, like, okay, dad's stronger, mom's stronger. So when they say no, they can use force to enforce that no, and I can't do anything about that. That's basically what you want to internalize. There's no use in me rebelling against my parents, right? And again, it's your responsibility that your spirit is healthy, that you're both just and gracious when it's necessary. But that's the important, like, where people is like, yeah, the no doesn't work. It's because you've never enforced your no. There's no consequence. Or if there's a consequence, it's a consequence that is not a real consequence. It's not a real punishment. It's not perceived as a negative crossing of a boundary. It's not a punishment, right? Like, so that I think punishment, discipline, punishment, they're similar, slightly different, but a punishment is necessary if people are not listening to the discipline, right? Like if they're not listening to the no, they're not listening. If I'm holding him and he starts stumping and kicking me, he gets a slap. You go in your bed, think about what you've done. And then, of course, when he's too young to understand, then it's like cool him off, and then he comes back like when he can't say sorry yet. But again, as soon as he starts talking, we're gonna teach the sorry thing. You know, like I think it's just I think it's just still valuable that moment of shock. So again, if you don't want to do the slap on the wrist, you can do the smack on the bottom, which there's no pain there. But I think the sting is actually helpful in, again, simulating. I think what's important is that you simulate life. So in a safe environment. So what, like in a practice environment, the coach can say, we would have lost the game. We didn't, because there's no real game right now, right? Like, but we would have lost the game. What does he do? You admit something up, suicide. Something negative, something bad. Oh crap, I made a mistake. Now I'm gonna have to run up and down court, and I'm exhausted. Now I'm gonna have to do it anyway, but now I'm exhausted. You know, like there's always this idea of of course not in all settings, like I don't hope your guitar teacher is smacking the shit out of you, but again, this misplaying a string is not dangerous to you, you know, like, but putting your hand in an electric socket is dangerous to you. So you want to simulate the shock that might have put him in the hospital. That's basically what you want to do. Or you want to simulate that car that could have run him over. Like you want to simulate, and this is, again, they forgot about that in 5 minutes. But in the moment they do internalize that, it's like, oh, don't go there. So that's why I think that's still helpful. I really don't agree indeed with stuff like using your belt and like, as soon as you start using objects to go beat your child, you're really beating your child. Like to me, the disciplinary slap, like I said, some people might not agree, but there's a reason, there's a philosophy, there's an understanding about why you would do that. Like again, like I said, you're simulating pain that you would have encountered if you would have crossed that boundary, right? Like in real life, if I would not have protected you from that, or again, if your sister might not smack you back because I don't want her to do that, but in real life, somebody might push you or kick you or whatever, you know. So that's why I think the kind of like controlled pain. It's pain. It's a sting. It's something like I said. It's gone in a couple minutes. It's not like you bruise your kids. But I think that is valuable to do that. Yeah. Let's not repeat myself, which I do all the time. Something else to say about that? Yeah. Well, basically, of course, there's other discipline. Like for us, we use a combination of. So, like I said, the extreme consequences when you really do something like kick or hit mom or dad or your brother, spitting at mom and dad or your brother, ripping the toy out of your brother's hand, especially after we've told you not to do that. Like the first time, of course, you teach them. After all, they know. You still keep crossing that line. So it's also like a repeated offense. I would use also a slap on the wrist. Or a slap on the wrist is easy. Sort of like the physical punishment, so to say, is only there for the extreme cases that would cause you pain or in the real world that are actually dangerous to you, that I want you to internalize, or gross offense, social offenses, calling names, shouting, not shouting, not always, but like if it's continued, so continued violation of somebody else in that some sense, and continued neglect of established rules that you're aware of. But otherwise, you have simple things like cool down. Like my daughter needs that a lot. Like she's very, very intense emotions, like people like that. So it's not like I don't understand the extreme no. Like she can have her tantrums would be like next level. Like just you feel like somebody's being murdered. Like, you know, like that monstrous. Cool them down, sit them in their bed. Again, the sorries I think are important, especially when they start to communicate. Those I guess like our most the cooling off in the bed time is one that we use a lot. And of course there's like other type of consequences, like, okay, you're not allowed to play with this toy for a week, or okay, now you're not allowed to watch this video. Like, if you're gonna act like that, if you're gonna throw tantrums while we're out and about, then you're not gonna go out and about. You're not gonna go play in the park for a week or something like that. Like, so you have, like, what do you call it? Like, removing privileges and benefits, so to say, right? Like, depriving you of privileges and benefits. Yeah, so I think that those are good ways to discipline, but I think, yeah, for these parents, I just want to, like, the idea that, yeah, it doesn't work because you don't enforce it. Authority is not authority. Authority isn't authority because they can enforce it, right? So there is, in some sense, behind every authority is the gun, in some sense, right? Like, it would be nice if it would not be like that in some sense the authority, we respect authority and can yield to authority, healthy authority in good situations, but because of our innate rebellion as human beings, there's usually consequences. If you don't listen to the coach, you get kicked off the team. Like, if you don't listen to the cops, you get thrown in the good jail. Like, you have consequences. And if you're not enforcing consequences on your kids, which again might or might not entail some form of physical discipline or other type of discipline, it's really hard as a parent because you have to be really diligent in the beginning. In the beginning, it's really hard because you're going to test those boundaries, especially when you get to like the 1.5, 2-year-old, like the no phase. Yes, it's going to be a fight. Like, it's going to be a week long, 15 minutes of like, no, okay, being bad. But you got to be a lot quicker. No, I said no. Next time you're going to go to bed. Nah, okay, you're going to go to bed. If you do that, like, the same time, like, if you show that your voice has weight, if you don't respect your voice, you say like, no, otherwise, and you don't do that, like, if you're not respecting yourself, they're not going to respect yourself, right? Like, respect you. So that's just, I guess, my tip. Maybe I should do another one about people that want to learn it but find it difficult, to teach you some, a lot of things of that behavioral psychology has really helped me be prepared, I guess, to be a parent, and also engaging with kids a lot as well. I do think you do see that people who have a hard time with disciplining their children have, in some sense, trouble in their social relationships as well. Like, so it's also about internalized skills. So that's why I'm saying, like, I'm not blaming every parent for having a reckless child. And again, some kids are a lot harder to discipline. I can already see with my son than others, but that doesn't excuse us, right? Like, a coach also has different personalities. Phil Jackson had to coach Dennis Rodman as well, right? Like, and he coached him differently than he coached Michael Jordan or Scottie Pippen or like the fifth guy off the bench. But still, everybody needs coaching and everybody needs discipline and everybody needs to be able to function in the context of the team. You want to prepare them for the real consequence thing, and as a parent as well. Doesn't mean you have to coach and discipline your daughter the same as you did your son, or the other way around. But what you do need to learn, you both want to teach them. It's about what you want to teach them. You want to teach them that self-discipline, delay of gratification. If they have that, then they already have a lot. They have control of their emotions. They're able to finally flourish. However you get them to learn that, that's your responsibility. There's no excuse. If they're chaotic, you might have to have more strict boundaries. You might have to have different ways of disciplining, different things that feel like a punishment to them, like stuff like that. Yeah, it's your responsibility. Be a parent, or we will be.